right, welcome everybody. Tonight is January 17th, 2024. This is the Upper Dublin School District Finance Committee meeting, and I will call the meeting to order. We have with us, in addition to the board members and administrators here, we have two board members here remotely, Alima Redding, who's a member of the committee, and Titia Shirkbeer, who it is where she is the middle of the night, and so I won't be surprised if she turns her camera off at some point, but she's still here. Jenna Evans, our vice chair, will join us if we're still going after the Jarretttown concert tonight. She will join us after that. And with that, let's get going. We have one presentation tonight from ICS about our transportation facility. Do you have any introduction to give, Andy?
So yes, I'm actually going to get the presentation started, and then I'll ask our team from ICS to join us. So to get us started, I just want to give a quick introduction. So this evening, as I mentioned, both ICS and I will be providing an update on the work that we have been doing related to our transportation facility since March 2023. If everyone remembers back to that March 2023 meeting, we discussed the transportation facility, and the board, the committee, I guess I should say, made two requests of the administration that evening. One was engage a real estate agent to evaluate other properties within Upper Dublin Township, and then proceed, we asked ICS to proceed with a concept design at the 309 site to keep the potential project moving forward. So the goal of tonight's presentation is to provide, as I said, details about the work that has been done since March. We will not be reviewing all of the details since we've been discussing this project since October of 2020, but I will give a little bit of history and talk about the why we continue to review the need for this facility. What I want to start with, though, is we did just put, since not everyone has had a chance to see the facility, we've shown pictures, but we did put together, and I'll thank Mr. Robbins and Mr. Trantis for helping to put together a brief video for us to review that just gets to the heart of the why, so you can see the facility, and then we'll talk more about it. So Ms. Evans, if you could just play that brief video, I would appreciate it.
From mid-August to mid-June, 39 drivers, 3 aides, 2 mechanics, 5 grounds mechanics, and 4 office staff report to 275 New Jersey Drive for work. The 7 mechanics report to the 12,600 square foot garage, while the other 48 staff members report to the 470 square foot office trailer. Every day, drivers and aides enter and exit the trailer at least 4 times in order to check assignments, get keys, and turn in reports to transport roughly 3,500 students to 6 district buildings and 45 private and parochial schools. Over the last 15 plus years, the needs of the district have outgrown this once temporary condition. The current trailer has limited space for drivers to complete their required paperwork, take breaks between runs, and has 3 staff members sharing one of the tiny office spaces. The interior lighting of the trailer is insufficient in the hallway, where drivers are able to receive their mail, which is problematic. In the upcoming months, the size of the office space will increase, which will not only give the transportation manager privacy when he needs to have a confidential conversation with a staff member without going to a different location if one's even available, but will provide a meeting space for professional development without having to venture out to one of our other district buildings. Another downside to the offices are the facilities that the trailer provides. Although there is a working restroom in the office trailer, it is not connected to an active sewer system, which requires a septic truck to come out to empty the tank weekly in order to retrieve the waste. Another downside to this off-site location is the inability to be on the district network, which reduces cybersecurity as well as presents other communication hurdles. Then there is the garage space. 2 of the perks of the garage is that it is larger than we need and it is well lit in the work areas. However, that lighting is very noisy and makes some aspects of the job difficult, especially identifying air leaks on brake systems. Another downside is that the space offers little security by way of parts and supplies for both our transportation and our grounds department. As you see, there's only one overhead door to get vehicles in and out of the garage, which requires careful planning. The space itself isn't in the best shape, with uneven floors, makeshift walls, and requires using a ramp to get vehicles in and out of the garage. Lastly, the facility is shared with another business, and we often have to contend with their tractor trailers making deliveries, which makes entering and exiting the property and parking on the property difficult. Thank you very much for your time.
So while Brooke gets up the presentation that I'm going to walk through, I want to start with the why. So I think that video does a nice job, and I think thank everyone for putting that together. The why is that we have a transportation department that provides an essential operational service to the students of the Upper Dublin School District. So we transport 3,500 students daily to our 6 public schools, 45 non-public schools, and we have about 50 staff that are in and out of that facility on a daily basis. So we need a facility and an infrastructure to support that department, and that's critical to the success of our daily operations. We know the lease for our current facility was only meant to be temporary, but we've been there for 15 years. Our current lease runs through June 30th, 2026, which makes our discussion tonight very timely because we're up against that clock to the end of our current lease. The current facility is in poor condition and does not have office space, as we saw. We've got a trailer that we're working in, and that leased facility that you saw costs us all in about $500,000 annually to operate there. Plus, we are responsible for any necessary improvements, such as fixing the parking lot repairs. We've had exterior lighting issues that we've had staff concerns about that we've needed to address. So we have all those costs, not to mention that we have the ongoing risks of, while the owner has been willing to work with us over these last 15 years, there is always the potential as we approach the end of a lease that the owner does not renew, does not allow us to renew there. And as Chris mentioned, Mr. Robbins mentioned, we share that facility with other occupants. They're also improving the inside of that building, so the future of that building is unknown since they're doing improvements. Future readiness for EV technology is another big why. So this board and our administration has expressed an interest in continuing to make sure we are prepared to take care of improving technologies, especially as it relates to EV and transportation. Buses, there are EV buses out there. It's a technology that currently exists. It's costly. They're still working on the technology, but it's a why of why we're trying to move forward and own our own facility, because we don't feel it appropriate to invest in a facility that we lease. Next slide. So why the 309 site quickly. So I want to review why we've made the recommendation to use this site. And I want to be clear, we've called it the 309 site specifically for ease of communication among the different sites that we've evaluated. This site we're talking about is between Fort Washington Elementary School and the Field of Dreams, so it's right next to the 309 in the back there. The original plans for the Upper Dublin High School included a plan to utilize this site for the transportation facility. We think it's important to utilize a site that the district owns, at least that's the recommendation from the administration. We have land that we own that is currently unused. It would also maximize resource utilization as we're not using it for any district operations. There obviously is the parent drop-off for Fort Washington that's being utilized back there. There are also no community groups that are using that space. Obviously, we use spaces on both sides, but that space sits currently unutilized. And then a non-district owned site, if a good option was available, which we'll talk through a little bit tonight, would require significant one-time costs and then reduce tax revenue forever. So this is just a brief timeline of what we've been through since October of 2020. we continue to, this continued recommendation has not been made quickly or without significant research and deliberation. So 3 years ago, we started this. It was my first conversation here at the district for the transportation facility. But as I mentioned, this conversation goes back to before my time, all the way back to the building of the high school. In February of 2021, that's when the board approved the first feasibility study for the 309 site, and Dewey Engineering did that work for us and determined that that site was feasible for the project that we are discussing. One of the things, the concerns that was raised was about an air quality issues on the site, and the board did approve Element Environmental to come in and do a air quality study on that site. If you remember, we had it approved, and then we had the tornado that hit us on September 1st of 2021, and that reset our priorities for district work. So it took us a while to get back on our feet and get everything moving forward with our facilities that were impacted by the tornado. And then in August of 2022, we did have the air quality study done, and what that study showed was the vehicles on that site. We brought all the vehicles there, turned them on, had no impact on the air quality at the site. October 2022, the board requested another district site be evaluated. So we looked at the district office site, which was on the Edwards Fields. And then we ultimately decided that we wanted to move forward or continue discussions at the 309 site. And then ultimately, the March 2023, the last public discussion we had on this, we were asked to engage a real estate agent and proceed with a concept design for the 309 site to keep things moving forward. And that's what we're going to discuss tonight. So one of the things we did immediately after that March meeting was we looked around for real estate companies that do work in commercial and industrial real estate, and we settled on JLL, which is a firm that has experience in both of those areas, and they also know Upper Dublin and the Office Park very well as well. So we thought it was important to utilize someone that at least knew the area, since we were looking specifically within the township. Similar to other real estate engagements, JLL they were given no fees unless they found a property that met our needs, and we actually made a purchase. So it was very much within their interest to work as best they could to identify a location that we could utilize or at least consider. They did a comprehensive search of properties that were for sale and not for sale. They facilitated a meeting with the Upper Dublin Township Land Use Committee just to make sure we weren't missing anything. So we did collaborate with the Upper Dublin Township as well. Opportunities were presented. There were opportunities for properties that were not on district-owned land, but we decided they were not good options for a number of reasons. The first one was that no site that we were shown was identified as move-in ready. So if we found something that was move-in ready and we could just buy it and move in, that would have been something we could have very easily considered. There were sites that were identified that could be purchased, but no site was purchase and move in. We would have to purchase site, tear down the building, and then rebuild, which would be what we're talking about tonight, essentially rebuild a similar facility that we're talking about this evening. And there were also costs estimated around $4 million to do that. That was based on a per square footage cost for commercial or industrial space and working with JLL. The other thing we've heard a lot about is parking lots being available, and why can't we just use parking lots? JLL did have conversations with property owners, and they also advised us that property owners are, for the most part, not willing to lease parking lot space, primarily because that limits their ability on how they can use their own property. So just leasing or using an unused parking spot in the township is not an option because we don't own it. We would have to enter into a lease agreement or talk about purchasing that from someone, which they would not be willing to do because they go with the property. Properties in a floodplain were also not recommended due to risk of assets there and insurance considerations for those sites. And then properties outside of the district were not considered. The main reason is inefficiency of routing. So if we're outside of the district and then we need to get to locations across the district, ideally you want to be based somewhere in the center part of the district. Coming in from outside would make for extremely inefficient routing. And then we also have to consider emergency situations and making sure we can get to our schools as quickly as possible if needed. So then the other thing we did was we brought forward in April of 2023 a proposal from ICS to enter into an engagement for conceptual design. And that's what ICS, our team at ICS, will walk through tonight, is the work they've been doing from that perspective. So I am going to stop now and turn it over to Tim and Bill from ICS, and they're going to walk through that piece of it. As part of that presentation, I'll also talk about funding strategies, and then we'll wrap up with recommendations and next steps at the end. So Tim and Bill, thanks for being here tonight.
Hang on a sec. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. As Andy said, my name is Tim Geider, and I'm here with Bill Slaughter from ICS. We're here to present the work that we've done over the last several months on the transportation facility and the update to the 309 site. Quick agenda for our discussion. Andy already kind of kicked this off by providing some background for all the board members and the community. We'll take the board through our conceptual design effort and the current building design, system components, site layout, and then we'll wrap up by talking about the updated budget, preliminary project schedule for design. So just a recap of the district vehicles. We've got kind of a breakdown here by transportation and also by grounds related vehicles. So just a reminder that the design for the site really would need to house parking for all these vehicles, the maintenance for these vehicles, also parking for staff who transportation staff, in addition to storage space for all the tools and equipment that's needed for the maintenance facility. Also, as mentioned in Mr. Robbins' video, the need for office space for the transportation manager, director of transportation, and records and things of that sort. And then lastly, the need for the infrastructure to be in place on the electrical side for the possible EV transition that the board and the district has been considering. So when we were asked to refresh this design and the 309 site layout, really that entailed verifying all the space requirements that were needed for the building itself, preparing new floor plans to be reviewed by the administration. Same thing with the site requirements, the wetlands, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and preparing new site plans for consideration. Really getting a lot of feedback along the way from various district stakeholders, from the administration, the transportation department. Also, the previous plan that was done a few years ago included a fueling station, which was taken out of this plan. We built in the electrical infrastructure for the EV and budgets and schedule. So we started this really with a kickoff meeting with the administration. We also performed an on-site review of the existing facility that you have, really to kind of catalog all the equipment that needs to be stored in the site. So we really needed to determine what the storage requirements were for this new building. We created several floor plans after kind of mapping out what that space program looked like and reviewed that with the district. We also evaluated all the existing information that was out there, including property and site data from dating back to 2008 when the original land development process was in progress for the other construction project. We did engage an environmental specialist to update review the wetlands on site and update the requirements for setbacks, which we've included in our site layout. And then also we gathered parent drop-off data. Both the front and the back of Fort Washington Elementary is used. So with this being in the rear location, we wanted to get a feel for how many students are being dropped off on a daily basis, the parents, so we can possibly build that into the plan. And then we created several options to review the district. And selected all major system components, get a good cost estimate together. So what we're looking at right here is basically the space program and the floor plan that we all collectively landed on. You can see there's 3 bays for the transportation vehicles. There's 1 bay for building and grounds maintenance specific, and parts and tool storage, grounds equipment storage as well. Multi-purpose room, as mentioned, for daily use by the bus drivers, also training, and between shifts, an area for the bus drivers to convene. Transportation offices and a secure vestibule too. The site evaluation and the proposed layout that we landed on is shown on this slide. You can see the new facility is kind of boxed out in that area between what are the wetlands and the Fort Washington on the lower right. These areas in red and yellow basically map out the setbacks required for the wetlands. And then we tucked the parking areas for the buses and grounds vehicles kind of on the upper left portion of the site. And it's secured via fence and area. And then we added the staff parking kind of right next to it, which could also serve another purpose of events at the Field of Dreams. And you can see here with the yellow arrows just the flow for the buses, the traffic flow. And then we also were able to build in rear parent drop-off to continue to maintain the ability for the district to have that as an option in the rear building for Fort Washington. And you can see the traffic flow in green. And lastly, the landscaping is included throughout the site. You can see there's a berm kind of right near that parent drop-off with trees and shrubs and plantings to provide some screening and reduce noise and general aesthetics of the facility. And then at the request of the district, so there was, from the storm damage in September of 2021, lots of the existing vegetation was damaged. So there was a request that we also evaluate potential areas where you would add back more landscaping. Our understanding is there's also additional funding available from the insurance claim that's unused at this point. So it could be a good option to do this. So we provided some recommendations and areas that could be considered, which we've highlighted on this map. In green, you could see areas that we've said really wouldn't be in conflict with construction. So if the district would like to, they could kind of go ahead and get started on planting those areas prior to construction, so you can allow some additional couple years of growth. And then there's areas that would be in conflict that you'd want to wait. And then to aid in that evaluation, we did provide some 3D renderings of this building from the Fort Washington Ave viewpoint. The top that you're seeing here is basically the existing conditions. You can kind of see the retaining wall in the parking area on the left. You can see 309 like towards the back of that. And then you can see the new transportation facility with the plantings right on that side of the building for reference. And this is at the point of construction completion. And then the next slide will show what would happen 4 to 8 years after. So roughly 1 to 2 feet is the expected growth rate of the different trees, and depending on species that would be planted. So we've reflected about 48 years of growth in this bottom rendering, just for reference. And again, this is reflecting what's in the design right now, not any of the additional landscaping that you could consider, just to give a frame of reference. And then here's the budget for the project. It's kind of hard to see, but the numbers are broken down into the building costs and then the site costs. The building costs include the general, mechanical, electrical, plumbing trades. Site costs are all broken down, including fencing, site lighting, curbs, asphalt, and then you have all the soft costs below, including contingencies and expected escalation, cost of escalation, because really to the midpoint of construction is kind of what we look at, and also design costs and other professional services. And the total budget is 10.27 million, all inclusive of everything that you see here. And then flip it back to Andy to talk financing.
Yep, I'll pick up here and just give an overview of how I see the financing for this project working should we move forward with it. So as Mr. Guider mentioned, we're looking at approximately a $10.3 million budget for this project. It was noted previously, but I think it's worth noting again that that $10.3 million does not include financing costs, builder's risk insurance, and permit and inspection costs. So it's there's a couple dollars associated with each of those, but we don't have those numbers in front of us right now. So just want to make sure we cover that. The recommendation would be to fund this project with a bank qualified bond issue, which cannot exceed $10 million. So we're right kind of on that bubble of $10 million that we could borrow, and $10.3 million for this project. And then the final borrowing we talk about being around when construction phase would begin. So it would be based on timing and actual project costs. The recommendation is to fund this. Obviously, we've been talking about using cash to pay for projects as part of our capital reserve fund, but my recommendation would be to finance this with debt, specifically because we're taking a cost that we have for our leased facility, which is around $500,000, and then we would be replacing that cost with the cost of debt service to pay for this. So it would not be a dollar for dollar, and I'll explain that a little bit, but I think that's why I would recommend using debt to finance this rather than talking about using cash from our capital reserve fund. But we would use a bit of cash because if at a $10 million maximum, we would certainly need to finance some of this project from our cash. How much could be a final determination as we move through the planning stage. The recommendation, as I mentioned, would be to wait to borrow until we move into the construction phase. So when we talk about where interest rates are today, we have probably until around April of 2025 if the project moves forward in order to start the discussions or to issue the debt for the project. That would be when the construction phase would begin. We know that while we're trying to minimize the impact on the general fund, if we borrow in April of 2025, we would have a debt service payment in the 2025-2026 fiscal year. We would also have lease payments in that year. So that's where we can potentially start to utilize the debt service fund. So we've got about $4.7 million sitting in our debt service fund to make that initial debt service payment to make sure we're not putting any additional stress on the general fund and having any impact on tax increases as a result. So the lease costs are approximately $500,000 today, but as we've seen, every time we negotiate a lease, costs go up. The expenses associated with that lease facility go up. So if you look at that over a 21-year period, which would be the expected, Tim, drop back to the last slide for just a second, which would be an expected 21-year period. I'm comparing what the total cost of issuance of the debt, the total payback would be to that 21 year. And if we use 3% as our generalized escalator over that same 21-year period, it would cost us $14,750,000 in order to lease the facility. So that's what we're using as a benchmark to compare against. So then this slide, if we move forward with that process, this slide gives you an idea of a debt issuance and the borrowing costs associated with that. And again, this is looking back. So the chart at the top of the slide is a chart that PFM will regularly talk to this committee about when we talk about borrowing. It's the benchmark for municipal debt here. They usually use the MMD, the 10-year MMD rate. And you can see where it's been over the last year. 2 times over this past year, I asked them for actual schedules to line up to that. So you can see back in March of 2023 where rates were. It was about a $16 million payback on $10 million. In the November timeframe, when interest rates were highest on this chart, and it was not planned that way, it just so happened the timing of it, that's when we asked them, it was about a $21 million payback on a $10 million borrowing. So I think the key here is that interest rates do matter, but where we're at in this project and having a cash balance in our capital reserve fund, it is certainly possible for us to utilize cash to pay for sort of the initial phase of this project up through construction and monitor interest rates and make a very strategic decision on when we borrow based on what interest rates are doing. And then it's also important to know that any of our borrowings do have a 5-year call option. So if we're at a point and we lock in at a rate that is not desirable, we certainly within after that 5-year period can look to refinance at a more advantageous rate. So the other thing I'll mention here is that, and Mr. Guider mentioned this, is the budget that they showed us of $10.3 million includes the landscaping that that he included in the rendering, the site view renderings. If we want to do any planting or landscaping beyond that, that's what Mr. Guider referenced. As you remember, we got about $1.5 million back from insurance proceeds due to value engineering on our projects, which reduced the cost, but the insurance company was still responsible to make us whole for. We have committed about $750,000 of that to the softball field, but there's a remaining $750,000 plus that could be available. As an example, we've received that for insurance proceeds from the damage to the facilities. The board could certainly choose to utilize that to restore some of the landscaping if you so choose to do that. And we can do more work around that as needed. So Tim and Bill, I'll turn it back over to you to wrap us up.
Sure. Since we're talking about landscaping, one quick thing I did want to mention to everyone is that if you noticed on the plan, there is a gap in the landscaping there, and that where the parent drop-off is. And that is there because there's a long walk for the students. So we wanted to maintain line of sight for the parents from where they drop their children off to where the teachers actually receive the students. That also is an area where during recess, the children play in multiple areas, and the teachers need to have line of sight from the hard play surface area to the playground to the field where the students play. So we left that area kind of out as far as landscaping goes. One other thing I wanted to point out is on the plan, the black and white portion of the landscaping that's shown there is slightly above what the township minimum would be. So we started with the township minimum. We added the berm in to try and create, a bit of a buffer zone there and some additional landscaping as well. So when you look at the colored renderings, that's far above and beyond, depending on what you decide to do, than what would be required by the township. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the schedule. Land development and design with the township typically takes about a year. If things go well, and we've already talked to the township about the potential of this project at both locations, so they are aware of the situation. Bidding and award of contracts takes about 3 months, and then we anticipate 13 to 15 months of construction. We tried to err on the side of caution there, so we think we certainly could do a little better than what we've presented here. And then there's 2 months of closeout for punch list items, getting the NPDS permits closed out, any of the township final inspections. But we feel the summer of '26 would be feasible to start moving the transportation facility over there. We don't see any issues with that based on the schedule we provided now. So what are the next steps? If you choose to approve the design and land development process, we will get going with that. We'll start schematic design, update the site surveys, determine the necessary relief variances. There are some that are in the report that we mentioned that we have to obtain from the township. I believe there's 2 and 1 approval. We then go from schematic design to design development and land development, and we do that in concert with the district, with Mr. Robbins and Mr. Lester and Mr. Leckman and the team. As we go through, we tweak little things, move stuff around, make sure that what we're presenting is totally beneficial to the district. Then we solicit bids from the contractors, and then at that point, once we receive the bids, the board makes the final decision to move forward or not. And then construction begins shortly after that. So that is the process that we anticipate and the next steps from here on out. So at this point, are there any questions from the board?
All right, thanks to all 3 of you for the presentation. Let me open it up to the committee for questions or comments. Anybody?
I do have questions on that committee. You want committee
Go
first?
ahead, Jeff, why don't you go first? I should mention, actually, I forgot to mention up front, but now Jeff Wallach is now a member of the committee, having appointed to the seat at the last legislative meeting. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thanks, Mark. Everybody, thank you for all that information. There's a ton of information there, and thank you for putting it all together. For the ICFs folks, Tim and Bill, I want to try to understand the additional landscaping possibilities a little bit more. So I'm looking at, I think it's slide 14, I guess it is. So the additional landscaping possibilities are everything in both the green, orange, and red, the distinction being when that could start vis-a-vis the project, if the project moved forward. Did I get that right?
That's correct. So the green could start right away. The red would impact construction, so we recommend doing that during construction.
Okay. And then we haven't priced that out yet, I guess, for any or all of that.
Yeah.
So that would still be done in like a next phase. And Andy, that would marry up with that range of numbers if we wanted to use the insurance proceeds. Do I have that right? Okay. Okay. And then I guess along Fort Washington Avenue on that same slide, there seems to be some landscaping that goes, or possible additional landscaping that goes further up Fort Washington, away from
next one.
Highland. Oops, sorry. Yeah, next, couple ahead. I think it's 14? Yeah.
Yep.
So the green that's further up Fort Washington, away from Highland, like up where like the ball fields are and stuff, is the concept there to, as you say in number 3 there, because of, or number 2, I'm sorry, because of sight lines, or is that just because there was landscaping lost there in the tornado, or a combination of both?
That's a combination of both. So, you know, those would be street trees, similar to the 4 or 5 that are still remaining. So we would create a line of trees along there, street type design.
Okay. And then you were saying how there needed to be a line of sight from the school to both the drop-off area and some fields. Is that sort of between the red and the green circles there? Is that the area we're talking about there?
Yeah, so if you look at along the parking lot area there, we're suggesting planting some trees right up against that retaining wall.
Yep.
And then the next planting would be right at the building, which would be to the west of the sidewalk that the students would use to access that. And that's the cloud in red. And then the cloud in green, it looks kind of like a funky 3-sided boomerang. That's around the retention basin there.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And if we can go back one slide, just to make sure I understand this. The drop-off area route would be the green arrows, is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
So people would come in off of Loch Alsh and then do that circle and then come back out on Loch Alsh. That's the planned, or the intent of that drop-off flow.
Correct.
Yeah,
Okay.
which currently they come in from Highland and then out Lock Ash.
Right, okay. And then the yellow arrows are representing the bus flow at different times of the day then, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Okay, I got that. I might have more, but that was my initial questions.
All right, thanks. Just want to make sure that Alima doesn't have anything. She's not on my screen at the moment, but as a member of the committee. You good, Alima?
So the access road, I don't know if you want to put that screen back up, but the access road that comes in off of Highland, that would be the main entrance for the buses to come back. But we figured, and kind of working with the district, that it'd be advantageous to have options for, you know, 2 locations for entrance and exit, depending on morning, afternoon, and events. So, but I think the main entrance would be along the access road coming from Highland, which is on the left-hand side of the plan.
Okay. And then when we think about landscaping, if there was a level A, B, or C, where are we in terms of landscaping?
So as Bill mentioned earlier, we'd probably be closer to B, because A would be kind of the minimum requirement, and we're doing over the minimum requirement of the township.
And if you were to do the clouded areas, that would be C, that would be even higher yet.
And not that it would be included in this phase, but I mean, I'm curious around what would that cost be to do the higher level of vegetation or landscaping?
We did not do a design for that yet. So we have 2 ways we could address that. We could do a design and put a budget to it, or we could landscape to a budget that the district decided they would like to provide.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Jen, go ahead.
Okay. So I'll start with this one. The drop-off, how many families or how many students, I guess, are using the back drop-off? Do you know that?
So yeah, we did a car count over several days.
Okay.
And it ranged anywhere from 28 to 40 cars.
Okay, so this, and you said this, and I believe it to be true, this is kind of far from the building, the Fort Washington Elementary School. So is there any opportunity, if we have that many kids out there, to have some shelter in case bad weather hits? I'm a little concerned because it's so far from the building.
So since COVID, there hasn't been a cover out there. We could certainly add that to the project. It would add cost.
I mean, I would be interested in knowing, what that cost is, because it's pretty far from the building. And I don't know, when I was there, it was one teacher was doing it. So that's a lot of children out there with one teacher. And
Typically, there's 2 to 3 teachers out there now.
Okay.
Since we started working on the project.
This was during COVID.
That's what I've observed
Okay.
on a regular basis. So just to give you some context, the replacement canopy in the front of the building is running around $300,000.
Okay.
So you could probably cover most of that walkway with the same amount of footage of canopy. So that gives you just a rough ballpark of a budget.
What about, how many cars are coming into the front of the building?
A few less, but not many less.
Oh, so it's
So
not
that's been like 22 to 30 cars per day.
in the front, okay. Okay, on the next page, so I love that you put these sight lines here, A, B, C, and D. They're a little hard to see because they're dark. But can you talk a little bit about that? Like, so let's, if you look at A, so it goes over to Van Sant. Is that little orange cloud potentially vegetation there could block the view, or are you just saying that
So we did sightline analysis, all these rays that you see
Uh-huh.
there. We did sightlines. Because 309 is at such a high elevation, it really blocks almost
Most
all
of
the
it.
building.
Right.
So, there's that orange area there, it could be added as a buffer for even 309. If you remember, prior to the tornado, there was a heavy amount of vegetation in that area there. The basins were overgrown, there was some trees in there. So we're trying to reestablish as much vegetation prior to the storm there now as part of this.
Can I just quickly
Yeah, go
add?
ahead.
The reason that that's so small, we can't replace the vegetation within the basin because we're not allowed to touch it, right?
Correct,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we can only do a little bit. So does that mean the facility will be visible on Sightline A? Like, because.
No.
No, you can put, either it's not visible or you put, it's, which one is that? I'm a little confused.
So sightline A, for instance, at the sightlines, at the start of the sightlines, we started at 5'6" basically at height, and then going across 309 to the roof line of the building, and from sightline A, at that starting point to the roof line, you're not going to see the roof line at.
Okay, 309 blocks it. Okay. And then for the other sight lines, there is vegetation strategically placed so you can't see it. To B and C and D.
Yes, so what we did as part of the sightline analysis is we looked at, what would be seen from these different areas, what parts of the building would be seen, compared that to existing vegetation, the damaged vegetation, and then what it would look like to put in a 12-foot tree, a 24-foot tree, and then, where those blockages would look like. So that, I think that is we've started that analysis. I think that would be part of the next step here, is to take the landscaping a little bit further. But I think we have a pretty good handle that these 4 sight lines and these areas that we've marked out would aid in screening and also just replacement of vegetation that was damaged.
Right.
The one thing I want to mention is the array that comes from Fort Washington Avenue. Obviously, since that's a higher elevation than the building, it's going to be difficult to screen that out initially. Once the trees mature, that would be a different story.
Okay.
But you're limited to the size of tree that you can plant based on the truck that could handle that.
Okay. All right, I think that's it for my questions. Thank you.
All right, Stu.
Thank you for all the information. 2 questions. First, this is more just confirming understanding. I know, and I am a recent Fort Washington parent, I know we're talking about traffic patterns with pickup at the end of the day at that circle. Based upon what we know about the transportation schedule, this is a question, but I assume there would be minimal impact to pick up and drop off because of the times that buses are out. I know that you said you have to do a traffic study as one of the next steps, but presumably you've already done some analysis.
There was a previous traffic study that was done as part of the previous analysis, but in talking with Chris, and you can speak up if you want, but the coincident times would be different, right? The buses are leaving earlier in the morning than the parents are coming in, and vice versa in the afternoon. So I don't know if you want to expand on that.
All of the parents will be picking up while our buses are out doing the run, so you won't have any cross traffic there.
Okay. And the second question, during construction, what would the impact be, if any? Presumably, parents would no longer be entering from Highland, they'd be coming down from La Couche, correct? What disruptions would occur during construction is the question.
We would have to reroute the drop-off temporarily because we're going to need to build all those roadways in there.
Okay.
There's already stone there, but there's elevation issues we have to deal with. The parent drop-off is actually has to be created there.
So it would be in a different spot, or they'd have to use the front of the building?
They would have to use the front of the building temporarily, yes.
All right, thank you.
Brooke, you have TTM, I'm guessing? Go ahead.
Go ahead, Tizia.
All right, thank you. Now, I do want to follow up a little bit. When we're talking about the planting, we're talking so far about screening the building. I think there's another concern of residents is the screening of the of potentially screening out the yellow buses. Is that included in the plan, or am I? I mean, when I look at the diagrams, I see a bunch of trees planted along that access road, I think it is.
Yeah, if you go back to the previous slide, that's what you're referring to. There's, see, on the left-hand side along the bus parking, you can see all the trees, shrubs, and plantings in that area.
Yeah, okay. Now, I just wanted to make sure that's all included. And just the green sort of the boomerang shaped things, that's just to indicate that those plantings can be done earlier, but those ones along where the buses are parked, is that something that we need to wait until after the project, or is that something that can also start sooner?
So because of the curbing and the paving that has to take place there, I would recommend holding off on that until towards the end of construction.
Okay, no, that makes sense. There are a couple of observations, and I just want to check that that they are clear, or that I understand them correctly. So when you mentioned that the removal of the fueling for the buses, I believe that is in part because buses can be refueled on site, which is much more practical and also saves a lot of back and forth of buses and personnel. Is that correct?
Yes, so there's, not only is there the concern of the purchase of the tank, but there's also environmental requirements that go with having a fuel tank on site. So the portable fueling by a third-party company would relieve not only the initial cost of the fuel tank, the cost of the controls that it takes to run that, but also any environmental impact.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and I think in terms of parent drop-off, I like the fact that that is included, especially because that relieves Fort Washington traffic, I think, to a large, potentially to an extent. But I also think that a lot of parents do use Highland and potentially even Summit to park. So I was wondering if we need to do anything more in about encouraging people to use either that drop-off area or use Highland to park, so that kids leave outside to leave in that direction.
Yeah, so we would work with the building principal to create temporary conditions to relieve any of the parent drop-off. Highland Avenue would be a good alternate or a good alternative, but we would need to work to get the teachers additional parking areas, which I'm sure we could do.
Yeah. And I think also a huge big benefit of this is that there will be staff facilities on site at a level that is, similar to other for bus drivers, which is similar to really what we provide for other staff in the district. So having a good facility for bus drivers to gather or to be between runs, I think is really pretty essential, and I'm glad that that's included in the plan. So to me, this plan looks exciting, and I also really like the fact that allows us to move to the transformation to electric vehicles when that becomes feasible. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Titia. John?
Great, thank you, and thanks for all this information. This sort of segues into what Titia was just asking about, but thinking about the building itself, are there any opportunities or thoughts around solar panels on the roof? Would that help us with the transition to EV? I didn't see that in the budget, so maybe that's something that's sort of the next phase, but can you speak to the solar panel aspect?
Yeah, we did include some considerations for other renewables in the report and reference them, but that's correct. They're not in the budget at this point. But if the district were to go and incorporate EV, actually put in some dispensers for fueling and start the transition plan, it's a natural fit to have some solar PV that could be evaluated and put on the roof. That would be the likely scenario. There's not a lot of land that you'd want to, for solar, but probably the roof. And just to be fair, it probably wouldn't augment a whole lot of the electrical load because you don't have a lot of roof area.
All right, thanks. I have a few comments and questions myself. First, in the parking diagram, there are 10 grounds vehicles that are included in the plan. Where do you envision those being permanently stored on this plan? Is that back behind the building, or is that in that lot that's up towards the Field of Dreams? But I don't think it's in the gated area. I don't see the space for them in the gated area.
The building and grounds, I'm just going to pull it up on here, but it's up in the upper left of the site.
Oh, it is up in the gated area there? Okay. All right.
Kind of like the angled parking at the top.
Oh, okay. Oh, they're labeled as bus parking. I assumed that those were full-size buses.
Directly across from that is the grounds. There's a couple spots
I see.
directly across from that.
Ground equipment. I see it now. Ground equipment spaces. Thank you. And I wanted to say regarding the additional landscaping that we've discussed, I've been advocating spending some of that insurance, some of those insurance proceeds on that. I think I would like us to see, and this isn't necessarily a question, but a statement for the committee and the rest of the board, that I'd like to see us devote some energy to researching additional plantings, and probably not necessarily where the plantings were lost. Well, we can't necessarily replenish a lot of the trees like in the wetlands areas because we're not allowed to touch it. But we did learn that 309 is really the threat in terms of air quality, and it would make sense to me to consider plantings in between 309 and the elementary school. So I understand the sightline stuff is certainly a valuable place to be pursuing plantings as well. But that's where I'd like to see us devote some of that energy. On this plan, I think it looks pretty solid to me. I'm all in favor of moving ahead. I will still say in my own mind that should a great site show up that would work for us, we could certainly pursue that in parallel. That does mean we would potentially lose a little bit of money because we're talking about outlaying money for the design phase now. But at least until we get to that construction decision in 2025, it still seems to me that other sites are still pursuable. I don't honestly envision that being very likely, having put as much effort into it as we've put. But it's still always an option, at least until we get to that 2025 construction decision. I also want to say regarding traffic flow, of course, we will do that transportation analysis, the traffic analysis. I can say that we have been talking to the township about traffic flow as well as part of their project that they just opened bids on. So there may be other possibilities for traffic flow as well that'll have to be incorporated into that traffic study. And then regarding the parent drop-off, Jen, your question about potentially adding a shelter, I would certainly encourage us to at least get a cost on that. I think you were envisioning when you were saying that, Tim, a breezeway, a covered walkway all the way to the building. I don't know that we have to go that far. We can have multiple options, just, sort of a bus shelter kind of thing near the drop-off, so there's a place to huddle if it's pouring, might be sufficient. So, you know, we can talk about those options when we see them. Am I right that that's what you were envisioning, though? Is that?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there's definitely multiple options. If you if you needed a covered canopy for the whole length, it could get costly for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I'm in favor of moving forward. Are there any other comments or questions? Do we have one from online?
Thank you. I do have another question, just kind of thinking out 10, 20 years of the usage. I know that we're building in the EV infrastructure, but I'm curious around, once we do decide to do that, what would be the cost or approximate cost, even if we're looking at it today, what would be that cost to make it EV ready? And then also, when we think about the parking spots compared to the buses, is there room for us to grow or take on additional buses if we need to? I'm just trying to think about how do we grow with the space as a community long term.
Yeah, I don't know if Andy wants to speak to the cost of the buses themselves, but we did get some budgets for the dispensers that could get added on. I think that's what you're referring to, right? The actual chargers, because we have built into the budget at this point just the infrastructure, right?
Are included in. So when you say infrastructure, that means the chargers, or it just means a space for the chargers?
It means we've increased the electrical service, and we've included underground conduit to locations where the dispensers would be added later, at a later date. So the cost of the dispensers themselves are not included in this, the EV charging dispensers.
Right, and I'll just jump in and add, right, Alima, part of the vision here is that we're preparing this facility for the future for EV. So in my mind, it doesn't make sense to add those chargers right now because we're waiting for the technology. The technology is going to change over the next 3 years if we move forward with this. So the infrastructure is there, the increased size of the electrical service is there, the conduit. So when we get there, and the facility is up and running, envisioning that, that's when we can really be looking at what are the costs of the chargers, what are the costs of the buses. Right now, buses, Mr. Robbins, you can correct me, they're in the mid 300s, upwards of $400,000. I'm assuming that will come down over time. There's also tons of grant funding that's potentially available for us, at least to apply for and continue to learn about. But it's hard for us to really apply for any of that while we don't have a facility to include in the application packet. So I think that whole concept is we're still learning that and learning more, and that will continue to evolve over the next 3 years. But there's certainly grant funding and federal funding available to help offset some of that.
We have 40 plus buses and other transportation. How many spots will we have?
I'll ask Mr. Robbins to come up and just address that because we do have space, but we have data on that.
Yeah. Excuse me. So right now we have 36 spaces designated for full-size buses and 16 spaces designated for minibuses and vans. We currently have 33 full-size buses and 17 minibuses and vans. So we would be able to move one of those minibuses into a full-size bus space. Now, I know it seems as if we're landlocked there, that we don't have much room to grow, but pre-COVID, we had 26 full-size buses routed. Now we only have 24 full-size buses. So we currently have more buses in our fleet than we are operating. So that growth, we wouldn't even need to worry about that growth until we're back up to fully staffed and fully routed.
And I'll add to that our enrollment projections at the moment do not show any significant growth. And so we don't foresee, I mean, obviously anything can happen further out into the future, but we don't currently foresee an increased need for space for buses. Did that cover it, Alima?
Yeah, it covered it. You know, I think that it does seem tight. And I understand that we're not fully staffed, but I would assume that one day we will be. And I'm just trying to think, you know, a little bit further ahead of what would we do with the extra bus if there was no available parking spots.
And I think that's what Mr. Robbins was getting to, is that based on our current utilization of our vehicles, we could have all of our buses parked there and we still have capacity, right? So I don't think we see any immediate need that we're going to grow beyond 36 spaces for buses, because we're only running 25 of them right now, if I understand, 24, 25. So we have capacity technically to grow by 12 buses, which is probably unlikely in the even 10-year future that we look at enrollment projections for.
Anyone else have further thoughts or questions? All right, so given that, so we'll get to talking about it more in the agenda. It's our first item on the agenda when we get into the main part of the agenda. But thank you very much for the presentation to really all four of you, and for the video as well, and all of the context and all the work that's gone in over the last really many years to getting us to this point. So let's dive into the regular agenda. Do we have any announcements?
I do not have any announcements.
All right. At committee meetings, normally we have a single public participation period at the end of the meeting so that the public can comment on items before the board would take action at the legislative meeting. However, because we foresaw a lot of potential interest in this meeting, we're going to have a public participation period now. There will be a second one also at the end of the meeting. So if anyone would like to address the board about items that are on tonight's agenda, please come up to the mic. We'll do a usual. Yeah, specifically about the transportation facility, actually, and we'll have another one for other topics later. So we'll do the usual routine. Please state your full name, where you reside in the district, and you'll have 4 minutes.
Ginny Vitella, Ambler. I have so many questions. I need much more than 4 minutes. I think that our district owes it to the families of Fort Washington Elementary School to have a town hall meeting where they can speak and ask questions and let them express why they're so against this location. I know we have been hung up on this location since 2018. We've had 3 or 4 petitions against it. It's this location that's the problem. Do I think that Chris Robbins and the rest of the transportation department absolutely deserves better than what they've had for the last 15 years? Absolutely. No one is denying that. But this location is horrible. This location is too close to an elementary school. There's too much traffic. I think it is a little disingenuous that the buses won't be going by the kids when they're dropping off or pick up, because buses leave early for sports. The kids are out there on recess, because I don't know if anybody's walked that area that's here. I know some Fort Washington mothers and fathers may have. That area is so close to where the kids play when it's not raining, because it's still flooding. Another question I had. And there's buses going to be going back and forth. Even on the map and the schematic, we have to move the drop-off portion further away from where they're currently dropped off, and it looks like there's parking along there, which is also seemed dangerous. I want to know why it wasn't built originally at this location. It was so fantastic back in 2008. When will we see the full analysis about what the real estate agent found? I think also, not only the town hall for the parents, but also I want teachers and staff to be able to speak openly, honestly, without threat of repercussions in a town hall format. So you guys can really feel and sense how this is an emotional and people don't want it in this location. I think the zoning is interesting. This lot, to Alima's point, is so small and such a small, weird shaped lot. And yet we have to use the full 29 acres from Highland to Lockash to Fort Washington and the service area to get over the township's requirements in order to build this facility on acreage that's over 25 acres, right? So I want to know what the actual acreage is where this building, which is now a hideous steel structure versus what it was 3 years ago in order to stay at about the $10 million mark. What is the actual square acreage of where this building and the parking used? Have we considered the light? How will lights be on 24/7? Where is the fence line? Because I'm also noticing here, which someone pointed out to me, that the buses will be using the same entrance and exit as the parent drop off and pick up. And the fields use them for the high school and kids park there. So we're disrupting a lot of different parking. The reason for those that are new to the district or new to Fort Washington who have never been at Fort Washington during Carline, we used to just all line up on Fort Washington Avenue, backed up sometimes all the way to the high school. This is why these alternate ways to get around came into play and why it is one of the busiest, most dangerous intersections in Upper Dublin when there's kids walking from a lot of areas. This is also a non-saleable asset. If we spend $4 million on an asset in the industrial park, where a steel structure belongs, where we'd have space to grow, we would have something to sell if we started change or we changed modes, or for some reason our contract changed that we went to actually allowing outsourcing. Right now, the union contract says we're not allowed to outsource, but maybe that would change at some point when it becomes necessary. I know I'm running out of time. I have gotten through half of my questions. That's why I think a town hall is important. This is a big deal. It's a lot of money, and people are very upset about this location and have been since 2018. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Sorry, my head is kind of spinning with all this new information. Caitlin Johnson, Ambler, 3 kids currently at Fort Washington, 1 kid going in another year. So I just had a couple questions because I am really concerned about the parking and the traffic. And when I saw that there was arrows going in the same direction that the buses could leave where the parents were leaving, but that's also around the same time after school that we have baseball games. So there's more parents coming down from Wacash. So I'm sorry, I'm just like spinning. Like, I just find it hard to believe that this isn't going to create such a chaotic mess of traffic. Because currently we have the bottom, which you already know about, the bottom with the 30 to 40 cars, and there's also the top line, but then there's also people who park during Highland which someone did mention that they park on like both sides of Highland. And then we have so much already issues with traffic that when there was the kindergarten like sing-along, we got an email saying, oh, everybody can come to see your kindergartner sing. Then we got an email coming back saying, well, actually, you can only have your 2 parents come because we don't have enough room for parking. So then it's really disappointing for grandparents that want to come see their kids, that some of our current events are limited by our parking that we currently have right now. And then you want to take away even more parking. Well, not take away, you kind of want to alter where people can go. And also when I was looking at the trees, it did look slightly odd that some of the trees did look like they still could be impacting sightlines based on where the kids play baseball and soccer and football right now, because the field is like flooding, so that it pushes the kids further out. So I just was a little concerned about where some of the trees were going to be placed. And also if you put trees on the line of, I guess, what is that, Fort Washington Avenue to go with the other current trees, then you block the makeshift ramp that parents come across to park on the grass because there's not enough parking to park anywhere else. So yeah, I was just slightly curious if there would be more conversation, like in depth, but you said you didn't do the traffic study complete yet. So I think I'm just concerned because we don't know truly enough of how this is going to impact people who are currently already having an issue. Also when you were talking when I read one of the things about the wetlands, it said something about in 2008 that we had altered some of the wetlands, and then it caused new wetlands to occur slightly further up in the area, and I was wondering if you would leave those new wetlands where they are, or would you be impacting them? Because one of it said you might actually touch it. And someone else had talked about sidewalks, so I was curious about sidewalks with the kids' second drop off looking like it's being pushed further out and being butt in between new parking. How does that work when the kids have certain events where they walk to the Field of Dreams? Is there connecting from the current parking or current playground to Field of Dreams by way of sidewalk? Just curious. I couldn't really tell. In 50 seconds. Sorry that this was so jumbled. I'm really just trying to comprehend all that was just said. But thank you so much.
Hi, Lisa Egan, Fort Washington. I came out and spoke a year ago at the meeting that we had in March of 2023, and I'll remind you guys, we had 2 hours, maybe a little bit more of public participation because there were so many people at that meeting. We had it over at the middle school. Lots of people talking about how they do not want this next to the elementary school. I don't disagree that, we could use a transportation facility that has, better options for the bus drivers and employees. But I think the main sticking point is we don't want it next to the elementary school. I have 3 children that attend there. They came with me tonight for a little while. And, we had all these people come out to say that they didn't want it. There was a petition. Lots of people, I think it was close to 800 people signed that petition. And here we are 10 months later, still moving forward, even though this is not what the people want. I mean, I'm sure you guys have all been following locally. We saw it up in North Penn. They had a vote, do you want to build a new high school or not? And they took a vote and the public said, no, we didn't want it. I think if you're just moving forward and thinking one thing about, like, financially it makes sense, maybe, we need a new facility. This is the easiest thing to put it on a location that we already own. That's fine. But again, you got to listen to all of the people. I mean, have you had any conversations with the other families at Fort Washington Elementary School? I mean, I want you to find families there that say, yes, please build this next to our school. Yes, please build this next to where our children play recess. I mean, the kids there have been through a lot already. And I touched on this last March too. They've seen construction already for the last, since the tornado. They've seen construction for almost 2 years, and they're tired of it. It was during the whole building, it was the geothermal drilling. The area that they did the geothermal drilling, it's just a big muddy mess. They can't even play out there. So I am concerned that you're going to have this bus depot construction now happening right there as well. And there's really not going to be a spot for them to really be able to go unless, that field is fixed somehow. And also, I mean, this was a kind of just a question, but the diagram that we were showing with the bus depot, part of it looked like it overlapped potentially with where the geothermal site was, basically where the Fort Washington carpool drop-off would be and some of the landscaping there. It looked like it might have overlapped with the geothermal location. So that was just a question that I had that I didn't really have an opportunity to ask. But again, I just wanted to get up here and speak again. I didn't have anything prepared ahead of time, but just wanted to remind you that there were so many parents that came out last year when we had this conversation. There were a lot of parents that signed the petition. It's not about the transportation facility itself. It's really the location next to the elementary school. I am not a fan of that, and I will continue to speak about that until we seriously look at other sites. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Dr. Sue Dickey. This is the 3rd time I've talked to you guys about this. I'm concerned about elementary school kids being near all those fumes. Asthma is responsible for 50% of all school absences. That's been true for generations. And I do have a question because I've heard a lot from other people in the area. I live in Stewart Creek Farms. This is still the tornado zone. It's been awful. There are very few trees left. We lost 800 trees in Stewart. That's taken the air quality down a lot. And 309 goes right past us. Believe me, it's that attractive. My question is, has the industrial park been investigated as a possible site? And other way. Thank you.
Rose, I live off Kane Drive. I wasn't going to speak tonight, but you guys have a thankless job. Thank you for being here. Thank the commissioners too. It's a thankless job. I helped Barbara Mass move. I have something to discuss. I helped Barbara Mass move a lot of the stuff to Mitzvah Circle on Monday for Martin Luther King Day. It was in and out of cafeteria. This building is a disgrace. I'm going to keep it positive. The exterior of the building, the cinder blocks are cracking from the floor to the roof. The entire building has black mold. Weather, caulking, missing all over the place. This isn't general maintenance. This comes back to the contractor that built this building. Goes to my next question. Who's building that property? Does anybody know? Would it be DC Huey or whoever built this property? Apparently, we've only been given very little notice. I found out in the last half hour there's major problems with geothermal. Looking at this building, you can't walk the whole property. It's kind of creepy for a guy to see the whole property, but it's a disaster. You mentioned JLL. You asked them to do something for free. I think they were giving you a bunch of BS. I'm trying to be polite. And you did that for free. I think you should go to CBRE. That office complex is empty. It's a disaster. I would ask you to put this on hold so we can find out what ICS has done. They said on June 19th, they went to look at stormwater runoff. June 19th was a 90-degree day. There was no rain. I would like to ask them under the Freedom of Information Act with my attorneys to get the copies. I'd like the copies of the JLL reports. I would like the copies from ICS where they did stormwater management. I think this township has a lot of problems. When buildings get built, there's no maintenance being done. The building across the street, which was built, wasn't built properly. The township took them to court. For some reason, they decided to drop the case. Now we're with a building which doesn't have that much damage. Walk the property, it's not that bad. This building is an absolute disgrace. I ask each one of you tomorrow to walk by the cafeteria and look at the cracks from the floor to the ceiling. That's going to cost a lot of money to repair in the next couple of years. Let's all put this on hold so we can have a public meeting. We can get our attorneys involved. Act. I would like to see the ALL, and I'd like to see the reports from ICS, specifically about the stormwater runoff, where they say there's very little water. And keeping it positive, like the thing says you have to keep light. That video was filmed today. If you looked real closely, there's snow. It hasn't snowed in Pennsylvania in 700 days. That video was a disgrace, what was just shown to us. That was filmed hastily today or yesterday during the snow. $14 million project. I think we deserve a little better.
Anyone else? All right, so with that, I will close public participation. I will announce we had no comments submitted online. And again, we will have another public participation period at the end of the meeting, and that'll be open for any topics. See, any comments from the administration or the team on any of that? You want to start off, Andy?
Sure, I certainly can answer some of it, and I'm going to look to our team from ICS to help jump in. I'll walk through, and you can help me if I've missed anything along the way. So I'm going to answer just some of the questions and try and address some of the facts that were asked tonight. So with the parent drop-off, I think one of the questions was, are we going to impact any activities? And I think one of the things we have addressed in our conversations was we do know there's after-school activities at the high school, so certainly there will be some parent drop-off through there during after-school activities at the high school, but buses will be out of there before that generally ever starts, because buses are out before the high school even dismisses. So there's already parent drop-off that is going by that site while there's after-school activities, and that is being managed. We did talk about also if buses need to leave later. That's why we wanted multiple ways in and out of the site, and that's one of the reasons it was designed that way. So buses could go out to Lockhouse through that road. They could go out to Highland, and as Mr. Sirota mentioned, there is possible another way out of the site, and further communications with the township. We also did feel like it was important, for all the reasons mentioned, to keep a parent drop-off as part of the design, because it has been valuable. Certainly during COVID, we did experience, the pandemic time, we did experience much more parents dropping off at buildings. So some of that backup on the main roads did even get worse. So having those additional sites was important, and we felt like it was important to keep it in design. We've talked about why the facility wasn't built there in 2008 to 2012. No one here was here when those decisions were made, even folks at the township. So I can't personally speak to why it wasn't built at that time. I only know that we don't have it today, and we saw what the facility looks like today. So that's why we continue to make the recommendation for our transportation department. Actual acreage of the site, maybe Mr. Guider or Mr. Slaughter, if you can come up there as I work through these. Do you know what the acreage of the site is? I think it's in the report. You just hang up there and I'll bounce stuff off of you just as I walk through my notes.
Yeah, so the combined site is just over 25 acres. I think it's 26 and change, but I can look it up.
Okay. I thought that question was about, maybe I misunderstood. I thought it was how much acreage is the actual transportation facility taking up, and the answer to that is approximately 3.
Approximately 3 acres, correct.
Yeah.
On the transportation site itself.
That sounds about right, but I have to double check.
Yeah.
All right. The lights, obviously, we have more work to do there. So the lights have not been considered, but they would be similar. I think, Mr. Lester, we talked about them being similar to what we're finding on our fields. So they're very directed.
Anything we have to put in now, high cutoff lighting, so the light's really not leaving the property. It's more direct onto what you're seeing. There's a lot less glare than the older style lights, excuse me, that you would be seeing. We were also restricted by ordinances of what times those lights can be on. Once our activity stops for the night, those lights need to go out. Same thing we do at all of our school buildings. We have the lights that are on through activities, but once the activities are over, we go down to a lower setting at night, and they return back on as we have staff coming back in.
So as far as the non-saleable asset, I think the discussion there was, if we ever move to an outsourcing model, right? And we're not currently discussing that in any way, but if that was ever a discussion in the future, I think the key takeaway there is every contractor that provides transportation services needs a facility to operate out of. So as long as the district is providing transportation services to the students of the township, we need a facility to operate out of. Our contractor would need a facility to operate out of. So that facility would be used even if we move to such a model, and it was discussed. Field, can you talk to, I heard a couple mention a couple times on the geothermal field about there still being flooding there. I don't know that we have flooding, but maybe you can talk about that, please.
So the runoff comes from the drainage in the parking lot, comes across there. And what we attempted to do was to create a positive grade to an inlet drain at the bottom of that where the children walk. So it is in a wet condition. We've had 6 inches of rain in the last month. Probably higher than that. I don't know the exact total, but yes, water still does leach out of the parking area onto that. The goal was to create positive drainage across the field and make its way into that inlet and into the stormwater basin.
All right, and then the wetlands, can you talk about if it impacted in any way?
Sure. So, we showed that on that one slide where the red area is. That is the wetlands that's based upon the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Our professional came out to take a look at the wetland areas, and doing that, he investigated the soil and the vegetation that grows, not necessarily the stormwater in there. So he confirmed that the wet areas that have the correct wetland vegetation and the correct soil composition is probably a little less than what's shown on the drawings, but we stuck with the drawings with the required setback in both of those locations.
All right, and then the one other thing, the geothermal field, there's no overlap on the parent drop-off circle?
No, there's a buffer area there, yeah. That would not impact the geothermal area.
Okay. I heard a question about has the industrial park been investigated, and that was something I covered in my presentation. So JLL, who I'll just restate quickly, JLL operates in the real estate field. So if you've ever worked with a real estate agent, they don't charge you to work with them. What they generate their fees on is the actual property transaction. So it was in JLL's best interest, in order to make money, to find a property that the district could utilize for this transportation facility. And through those discussions, they were not able to recommend anything to us. They obviously made recommendations, but we talked about why they didn't meet our needs and why they were not feasible, or that they would potentially add $4 million plus to the cost of this project. So JLL absolutely had in their best interest to find a facility that worked for find a property that worked for this facility for us to move forward with. The video, I do want to again thank Jason and Chris for their work on this. Yes, some of the final touches were just put on today. These are internal staff that have other jobs that were doing this, so I absolutely thank them for the time they spent on that to give us a good sense of what that facility looked like. And I appreciate the work they did on that. There has been no decision to build a facility. So what we're talking about tonight is the possibility to move forward to start a process to design and go out to bid. So there is no contractor that was yet awarded bids to build on this. So that's what we're starting to talk about, the process tonight for how that would move forward. So ICS is obviously the recommended in item A to be our construction manager and to lead us through that process, but there is no contractor that's been awarded that work yet. And then, Mr. Lester, I do think it's important just to address this. I think it was inferred that this building, there are significant structural issues and black mold in this building. I think it's important that you just address some of those comments.
Yes, we do have issues with mildew. Any of our north facing sides of this building, we do get mildew, as with most of our buildings. We have, last year is the first year we started implementing a plan. We're going around cleaning exterior buildings. We didn't take a large section of many buildings, just it was our first year going through it. We wanted to make it manageable. This year we're doing a larger portion. And the high school, as we're going through our budget process, we are putting money in this year for the entire section from the natatorium all the way through the Performing Arts Center, or this face of the building, which would include the cafeteria. Pressure washing is part of that. We did facility inspections. We went through with ICS to go through, look at our facilities, what the needs are, and we do pay attention to any facade needs. We have identified areas that need repair, and as we pressure wash also, we're going to expose those repairs and make them make those as we go. We do know that we do have some masonry repairs around the building, which is normal wear and tear for a building of this construction.
And just to make sure, all of your comments are exterior.
That's correct.
There's no black mold inside this building.
No, it is all exterior. There is no mold inside this building. We were very prudent, especially after the tornado going through, doing air quality testing, building inspections. This building really has a clean bill of health inside air quality. And we do perform tests if anything is questioned. We don't hesitate to bring in a third-party firm that we use for air quality testing.
I think those are all my comments, but if you think I missed anything, happy to add.
All right, thanks. There were a couple more that I wanted to comment on. There was a question of when will we see the full real estate analysis. Purchase and sale of real estate is not a public meeting topic for Pennsylvania government entities. So that while we did look at multiple sites across the township, that list will not be made public, at least not anytime soon. Are there sidewalks all the way out to the Field of Dreams parking in the design from the building to the Field of Dreams?
Not currently. There's only a sidewalk from the building to the parent drop-off area.
Right, so to the parent drop-off, and then from there, you could theoretically walk along the road, but not along, there are no sidewalks all the way out to Field of Dreams. I wanted to expand on Andy's answer about who will build the property. We don't have a construction manager. We do have a proposed construction manager. We don't have a contractor yet, and the process would be that through the next year, we would develop bid documents. They would go out to bid. The lowest bidder would win if we decide to move forward, the lowest bidder would win, and that would be who the contractor is. We won't know that until 2025 at the earliest if we move forward. Let's see. Did I have anything? Did anyone else have anything? Okay. All right, I think that's it for this public participation period. Let's move on with our agenda. We do have minutes from 3 consecutive Finance Committee meetings because we've had membership and quorum challenges. I will say, by the way, Jenna Evans, who would normally be sitting here, will be here shortly. But in the meantime, we do have a quorum. So members of the committee have had an opportunity to review the minutes from the last 3 meetings. Can we accept those and move those forward?
Yes.
And that's a yes from me. I see Alima nodding. So, yeah, we'll move those ahead. Thank you. Hopefully we won't have those piling up in the future. First up in our reports and recommendations is the construction management agreement with ICS. Anything to say about that that's not already discussed?
No, I don't think so. I think the only thing I would note is I've asked them to, our professionals from ICS, just to say if there's any questions on the fixed fee versus the not to exceed costs in the contract. So again, you don't have contracts before you. We're still in conversations and negotiations with ICS with our solicitor. So we hope to have final copies of those, at least in a good final draft for the Monday night meeting. But there are 2 separate portions of the cost for the contract. One is the fixed costs, which is the $1,076,636 for the base program management costs. And the other piece of it is the site services not to exceed $560,000, which would be the construction phase of the project. So I did just want to point those out. And if there's any specific questions about what's included in each of those, certainly I'll let our professionals answer those questions. But the recommendation is to move forward with ICS Consulting as our construction manager for this project, and that would allow us to move forward with design and land development.
All right, comments or questions from the committee? Jeff.
Would be curious around what those cost, a breakdown of it, and then what's the main difference between the two?
Yeah, so the first cost that Andy referenced is really the program management portion of this. So that includes all design, architectural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, civil, and landscape architecture. The second cost is associated with treated as a reimbursable, basically like time and material during construction for on-site representation from ICS to oversee construction. These are the same agreements that were used for the storm damage management by ICS. So these are just modified for this this project.
Alima, did that answer your question?
Yeah.
All right, thanks. Jeff, go ahead.
First, one question just to follow up on that. So I know we haven't seen the contracts yet, but ICS as the CM would hold the contract for design as opposed to there being a separate design contract? Is that the concept we're discussing?
Yeah, ICS as the program manager would be owning the design and also the construction management, estimating like throughout the whole process. So making sure that the budgets that you've seen today and the design is all intact by the time you get bids.
And then as part of that design, does ICS do that itself, or is part of that sub-consultanted out, for lack of a better phrase?
So the MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, is done in-house through our sister firm, CMTA, which you guys are familiar with. We sub out the architectural and the civil and the landscape architect as well.
Okay. That was my question. Mr. Sirota, do you want like comments generally on the item?
Yeah.
I am in favor of moving this forward to the legislative meeting and getting it on the agenda. I think, to me, we can't keep having the transportation facility where it is now. That video showed aspects of it. Mr. Robbins and his people live it every day. And I know there are people that are saying they don't disagree with the why. But I think, to me, we need to take some action to move forward. I look at the proposed schedule for this site, and it's tight. It's tight to get us to a facility in, I think it's August of 26, if I have my year right, which dovetails into the end of our current lease. And to me, that's very material. Yeah, we definitely sat here last March, and we tasked the administration essentially a two-pronged approach, as Mr. Leckman said, which they did dutifully. And to me, we're at a point now where we've exhausted the other avenues. I mean, the work the JLL did showed that either because of logistical or viability reasons, financial reasons, that other sites, to me, aren't an option for us right now. Mark, you said a little bit ago, if something were to come up, could we always shift gears? Sure, I'd be willing to entertain that. But as we sit here right now, I can't identify that, and I'm worried about sitting here and trying to anticipate it further, which gets me to, we need to take action and start taking action to move forward, and this would be the next step. I think there's a lot of work that still can be done in the design and the planning aspect. If ultimately we go forward with a 309 site, I'm very much in favor of the augmented landscaping approach and investigating that, whether it be landscaping to a level or landscaping to a budget, but seeing how that all plays out. And I think it would behoove us to, as part of the design, if it goes forward, to maybe do that sooner rather than later. I know as part of the design, we'd have a traffic study, and I know we've heard some comments about traffic and issues like that. I think that the additional intelligence that would be gained from that traffic study, again, it's a material fact that could shape things, as from signage on to whatever else is deemed necessary in that traffic study as traffic studies are done. And Tim, I don't know if this is the kind of thing, and I'm interrupting my comment with a question, whether that's like a PennDOT-driven traffic study or if it's something we commission privately. I'm not sure. It really doesn't matter at the end of the day, so you don't have to answer at this point. But again, it would be more data points to me for us to continue in the development process. I think that, to me, the due diligence that the administration has done, much of which has been at the board's request or demand in terms of air quality studies and investigating other options, whether they be on district lands or otherwise. I can't, to me, see at this point a different opportunity out there. I think there are benefits of what we're doing if this does move forward. I see logistical benefits. I see benefits in ownership of a facility so that we can think about things like EV technology. I see financial benefits. So I hear what members of the community are saying, and I certainly value all of those comments and will continue to value and take in all of those comments and thoughts as we move this process forward, even toward voting on just this initial step. And I say this initial step because, yes, it's a commitment of a significant sum of money to move forward, but there's still a lot to be done and a lot to be discovered and planned, I think, before we get to the final product here. And so I think for those reasons, I'm in favor of moving it forward to the legislative agenda.
All right, thank you. Jenna, I know you just sat down, but we're in the phase where committee members are discussing item 7A on the agenda, and I want to make sure you have your chance to weigh in if you'd like to.
Yeah, and apologies for being late. I was watching my little guy at the Jarretttown concert. Yeah, and I was listening on the car ride over, so I didn't get to hear community input. I tuned in as there was response to community input, so apologies for that. But look, my view is I'm sensitive to the fact that it's not a popular spot with everyone in the community. But I'm not comfortable continuing to kick this can down the road. You know, at this point, the facility that exists is, you know, is nowhere near the standard that we want for our folks. We tried to find a spot elsewhere. We're not able to. This is land that we already own. And I'm sure those financial benefits were discussed in the presentation, which of course I read. So at this point, I'm comfortable moving it to the legislative meeting as well. I think, you know, for a lot of the reasons that we've talked about before, this is an important piece of infrastructure. Again, I think it's fiscally responsible to put it there. That's where it was originally intended to be placed when, you know, the high school was originally conceived. So for me, yeah, at this point, I'm comfortable moving it forward.
Any comments from any other members of the board?
I do have a question really quick for Andy.
Yeah, go ahead.
Would we secure lending at this point? When in the process, I'm just trying to understand, when would we begin to secure lending?
Yeah, we would certainly start conversations with PFM, our financial advisor, but my recommendation would be that we wait to secure lending until much, much closer to the construction phase. Ideally, after we open bids and make sure we have a feasible project that fits within our budget, and then we'd sort of be lined up, and then once we have that information and the project is approved, we would secure financing. We need about $1.2 million in cash flow to get to that construction phase. So my recommendation would be cash flow that $1.2 million, and then talk financing at that point.
And then the funds for what that we're looking at right now are coming from where? Have they already been budgeted in?
Right, so those are all part of the budget that ICS presented to us this evening. That initial $1 million is sort of the bigger piece of what's included in that initial $1.2 million. So that the numbers that we're approving as part of item A here are part of the overall $10.3 million budget. And capital projects would pay for the would cash flow the project up until we borrow.
I'm in favor of moving forward with this leg of the project. I won't repeat a lot of the reasons why. I think that my fellow board colleagues have explained why. Cost, what's best for long term for the community, thinking about the facilities in which our employees need to have to work right now, and thinking about it long term as well. So I'm in favor of moving it forward.
Okay, thanks. Anything from anybody? All right, I have a quick question, probably for Tim. If in the case if we move this forward and then another property does come up that seems worth pursuing, how are we committing the entire $1,076,000 right now and it would all be spent, or is there an opportunity to potentially short circuit that and spend only a portion of that?
So we've provided Andy with a schedule of values that takes us through all the different milestones. So at any point in those milestones, you could theoretically put the pause on and evaluate another site if it did come up.
Okay. So it's not all up front, it's as the costs are incurred.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, so the building could be placed just about anywhere. However, since the civil design is different based on properties, that is what would have to be redone or start from scratch.
All right, thanks, Bill. So yeah, I've been working on this since, well before Andy got here. It certainly has been the case that kicking it down the road so far has not worked in our favor. When we first started talking about this was a cost savings in year one. It certainly isn't anymore. We don't know how long the payoff is, depends on what the interest rates turn out to be when we borrow. But because I think it is certainly fiscally beneficial to do it in the long term, it does pay itself off at some point. And we can do it without, and I love the idea of committing some of our debt service fund to help bridge the gap and not impact the general fund and therefore not impact property taxes to accomplish this. I absolutely think we need to move this project forward with the understanding that we are not actually committing to do it until sometime in 2025, depending on what the schedule, how the schedule actually plays out. But until we go and get bids and select a contractor based on the low bid, accept one of those low bids, we haven't actually committed to doing it. I think we have to continue to move forward. We can continue to move forward with other ideas, including things like a bus shelter near the pickup, additional tree work along the 309 side of Fort Washington, and screening for the facility and other properties if we, get lucky. We can do all of that in parallel, but we can't afford to continue to kick this down the road further if we want to have a chance of meeting the end of our existing lease. So I think we have to move it forward. And now I think we've heard from all members of the committee that we're in favor of moving it forward, but just to do that in some official way. So members of the committee, on item 7A, are we prepared to move this forward to the legislative meeting with the understanding that we don't have the actual contract language yet, but we will see that with the legislative agenda?
Yes.
Yes. All right, now it's a yes from me. Thank you. So let's move on to item B. We have a change order from CMTA on the boiler project.
Yeah, so this is a change order of a reduction of $13,575. When this contract for the boiler project was approved, we were still in communications with Upper Dublin Township about how we pay for permits and inspections. If everyone remembers, there's a township calculation that calculates what those fees are. We've worked out an agreement with the township moving forward. We're under an understanding that we will just be charged actual fees as they're incurred. So this is a change order to remove it from our contract costs, and then we've been paying the township directly for those fees. And just to give you a sense, to date, we've been billed $700 for this project. So I think it makes sense, and we're very thankful to the township and their willingness to work with us and come to that agreement for this project and all future projects.
That's great news. Any comments or questions? All right, so we'll move that forward. Yes, okay, thank you. Monthly financial reports.
So monthly financial reports, I think everything continues to trend very much in line. I don't have anything to specifically go through in detail to highlight, other than just to say receipts are slightly less than last year at 83% compared to 86% of budget. And I will talk about one item that we have going on there that's driving that. And expenditures are very much in line, 43% of budget spent to date compared to 42% last year. If you look at the one report that I provide, which is the tax collector report, one of the things you will notice there is one of the things we've noted the last couple of years is our delinquent taxes have been trending down at their lowest levels over the last few years. So on the bottom of page 11 of the packet, you see our delinquent tax trend going from 825 in 2020 all the way down to 516,000 last year, 2022. This year, that number jumped up to a little over $2 million. And what's driving that is basically one commercial property that made up about $1.5 million of that $2 million. So certainly it's delinquent taxes when so our tax collector collects taxes up through December 31st. And then there's a process by which he can no longer collect, and it's turned over to our delinquent tax collector, Portnoy. So that will be collected. It will be collected at that $1.5 million actually plus penalties. So it really just a cash flow issue at this point in time, but that's what's driving that. If you actually look at the data behind those numbers, we have fewer properties, 89 this year as compared to 95 last year, that actually went into a delinquent status. So without that one commercial property, we had about 470,000 turned over as delinquent. So everything looks good from a financial standpoint, and that's what's driving those numbers on the tax collector reports. If there are any other specific questions about any of the other reports, I would be happy to answer them.
On that report, I have a question, not specifically on delinquent taxes, but on regular collections. We're looking at 95.8% this year. On the report ending December, is that final at this point?
That's final, and that's much lower than the 97% that we project specifically because of that $1.5 million.
So that really is just the one property?
That's correct.
Because, yeah, that's a historic low for us, I think, or certainly in the time I've been on the board.
And a historic high on delinquent property taxes as a result of that. So that one it's one of our top 10 taxpayers.
All right. Any other comments or questions on the monthly financials? Okay, so we'll move those ahead. Yes. All right, thank you. We have budgetary transfers, one for this month and one for the previous year. Do you want to cover those together or separate?
Yep, I will cover them together, and I don't have anything to note on this year's budget transfers. I do just for the, everyone that might be new, and just as a refresher, the reason that we have budget transfers on from last year as of June 30, 2023, this is an annual item that comes up as we close out our audit, and you'll notice that everyone has a copy of the audit report in front of them, which I'll cover next. Budget transfers typically occur throughout the year, but there are a number of items that we reconcile through the audit process. Items this year as examples are The insurance claim was about $2.57 million. That obviously wasn't part of our budget, that we need to make transfers as we close that out at the end of the year. There are audit entries completed for leases and end-of-year scholarship awards, and salary and benefits. There's lots of salary and benefits accounts that get reconciled at the end of the year. So these budget transfers are really just necessary for compliance purposes. It does not change any of our year-end financials that we've reviewed prior. It doesn't change our end-of-year fund balance or any of that information. It's really just a compliance issue that we go through with the close of the audit every year. So if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
All right, any comments or questions on either of the budgetary transfer items? All right, we'll move those ahead. Yes. All right, thank you. Item F, the single audit report.
Yes, so in order to save paper, I do apologize. If anyone does need a copy, we're happy to provide a copy. It's not provided in the packet because in front of all of us tonight, the board members, you have a copy of our annual single audit report that we get every year. So obviously, an electronic copy is available for anyone following along at home, or in the meeting is available as an attachment to the agenda to follow along. So going through the annual audit is a annual requirement that school districts must fulfill and go through. It reviews our financial statements. Our auditors review our internal controls, and it's all completed by an independent auditor. We use Gorman and Associates and have for some time, and they continue to do an excellent job for us. What you see before us is our June 30, 2023 report. And while there's valuable information, obviously, throughout this report, I do encourage every board member to read this report and take a look through it. Some of it is a bit dry reading, but it is excellent information for everyone to understand. The most important information, I think, for the board to be aware of is page 108 and 109 of the report. And that reports that the auditors have issued an unmodified opinion for both our financial statements and federal awards at their conclusion, which ultimately means it was a clean audit for us. No material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, non-compliance noted, and that is obviously our ultimate goal as we go through and close out the year and go through our annual audit every year. And I think as I do every year, I would like to recognize Ms. Baldessano for all of the work that she does. She is certainly, I have oversight, but she is the lead, does all the lead work with our auditors and is responsible for doing all of the detailed financial and accounting work throughout the year. So she is the lead, and I'll thank her the most, but it's certainly a testament to the work our entire business office team and everyone across the district to make sure we can achieve this at the end of every year. So I am not planning on walking through the details of this report. We review our financials and where we're at on a regular basis throughout the year. So in March, we'll start to talk about projections, and then, we've had a lot of discussions around closeout of the year and transfer of the final recommended capital reserve amount. So certainly if there's any specific questions that come up tonight, I'm happy to answer them. As you read through it, if you have any other questions, I encourage you to reach out to me. I'm happy to talk with you. And if there's anything specific we ever want to address at a public meeting, I'm happy to do so. So if there's any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
All right, and certainly big congratulations to you and Jen and the entire team for yet another clean audit. This is the kind of boring stuff we're really looking for. So definitely these are the ones you want to be boring. And so that's great news. I will also just say, in addition to this being attached to the agenda, these audit reports are on the website going all the way back to 2013-14 for anyone to read. And there's many more boring clean audits in that folder. Any comments or questions from anyone on the audit? All right, so we will accept that audit at the legislative meeting? Yes. Yes, all right, thank you. We have a transfer to the food service fund.
Yeah, so this is another item that is closed out with our auditor, with our audit each year. So as you know, when we move money between funds, that's something that the board is responsible for approval of. So tonight we need to finalize a transfer with the audit, a transfer from the general fund to the food service fund in the amount of $7,412.15. So where that's coming from is in our food service department. Obviously, every student in our district has access to meals within our food service department. So one of the things that we do, obviously, we operate under the National School Lunch Program, and there is a cost. Obviously, there are certain students that qualify for free and reduced lunch, and then others that pay the full meal price. One of the things that we are not able to do is if a student does not have enough money in their account, we are not able to turn any student away from a meal, regardless of how much money they may or may not have in their account. What that unfortunately leads to is at the end of the year, while our food service department does have a process to follow up with parents on overdue accounts, we do end the year with some balances that are in a negative, or some accounts that are in a negative balance. The food service department is not permitted under PDE guidelines and accounting rules to carry debt from one year into the next. So what that means is ultimately the general fund is responsible to make the food service department whole for that debt that exists at the end of the year. And that is primarily what we're looking at here. The last 2 years prior to June 30, 2023, we have not had this issue because if you remember, we were operating under a program of free meals, breakfast and lunch for those years. So this started again with the close of last year, and we're already seeing negative balances happening this year as well. So again, we have a process to notify. Food service department is working with the student services department to maybe help students and families that might have needs that are not being met. But at the end of the day, we are responsible for the general fund is responsible for making the food service whole for any deficits at the end of the year.
Any comments or questions? All right, just as a reminder, under normal operations, the food service fund is an enterprise fund. Therefore, it is effectively self-funding as an independent business. It is not tied to the general fund except for this one year-end reconciliation. Before the federal free lunch and breakfast program, this was an annual activity, right? This is not unusual.
Correct. This was something we've done in prior years.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
So given that there is that, we haven't had to do this in a little bit, how does this compare to prior years? Because I'll admit, I think we haven't had to do this since I've been on the board for 2 years. So is this kind of in the range that we would expect?
I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. I know it's higher than we've previously experienced, and we're already seeing numbers that are in excess of this number this year. So it's definitely a number that's trending upward.
Any others? All right, so we'll move this ahead to the legislative meeting? Yeah. Yep, okay, thank you. We've got the MCIU budget.
Yeah, so this is what you have before you is the MCIU budget or the proposed budget, we should say, for the 2024-2025 fiscal year. So this is their member services budget, which is separate from special education programs and services that we participate in. This is really, for lack of a better word, a requirement for any member school districts in Montgomery County to participate in this program and pay this fee if the budget is approved. So the budget's made up of 3 areas. Again, you have all the information in your packet: the Office of Community and Government Relations, the Office of Organizational and Professional Learning, and the Office of Technology Services. The total of the budget for those 3 areas is a little over $2.1 million. It's a 3.5% increase over the prior year, and only about $1.56 million of that is paid for by member school districts. So the IU obviously covers the difference of that with other revenue sources and other program revenues that they bring in. So the membership contribution to fund these services has no increase over the current year budget. So So while the IU total budget is going up by 3.5%, the fee that is being passed through to school districts to pay has a 0% increase. Upper Dublin's share of that is $64,895. It is a $401 decrease from the current year. And again, I'll note this is only a very small portion of the overall MCIU programs and services. It makes up about 1% of their entire organization. As I mentioned, it's separate from special education services that we receive from the MCIU, which we pay for on a fee-for-service model. So it's recommended that we move this forward and approve this for the MCIU.
Any comments or questions? Okay, we'll move that forward. All right, thank you. We have a settlement stipulation.
We do have one settlement stipulation. This is one of our district-initiated appeals that we have come to a resolution with the property owner of 467 West Pennsylvania Avenue. The result of our conversations and the settlement stipulation is an increase for the district of $91,664 for the current year and $63,682 for next year and moving forward, minus any changes in millage rates.
All right, comments or questions? Okay, we'll move that forward. Yes, thank you. And we have some more exciting items. We have a donation from Upper Dublin Youth Wrestling.
We do. We have two donations to talk about tonight. So one is from Upper Dublin Youth Wrestling Association. So if you remember last year in May, Mr. Hyland made a recommendation and did include it in his budget for this year to replace the wrestling mat here in the high school wrestling room. And the reason we needed to talk about approving that in May was because of the long lead time. It was about a 25-week lead time to make sure it was in place by the start of the wrestling season. I did check in with Mr. Hyland, and he said it was in place by the start of the season, and everyone that's utilizing that room is very happy with that new replacement mat, both our internal teams and our external organizations that use that room. At the same time, Mr. Hyland was in discussions with our Upper Dublin Youth Wrestling Association, and they expressed a desire to support this purchase as they are regular users of our wrestling facilities here for their youth programs. And we are extremely thankful for their generous donation, their proposed generous donation for that organization that they made towards the purchase of that mat. It's $5,000. And just as a reminder for anyone listening or our board members, per board policy 702, donations must be accepted by the board. So this is recommended to be accepted this evening, and the board must accept this donation at the legislative meeting. So we are very thankful to our Youth Wrestling Association, and we recommend the board accept this donation.
All right, thank you, and we certainly appreciate the relationship we have with not just the Youth Wrestling Association, but all of the community groups who contribute in this way. Any comments or questions? All right, so we will move that acceptance to the legislative meeting. Yes. All right, thank you, and we have a donation from Acme.
We do. We have a donation from Acme, which actually comes from customers that live in the township that made donations at the register at the Acme in Drescher. So our food service, this goes directly to our food service department. They received a very generous donation from Acme Markets in the form of gift cards of $1,800. Gift cards are obviously a great benefit to our program. We do actually utilize a tracking mechanism for how we spend those gift cards. It's much cleaner, obviously, to receive a check and then capture that through our accounting software, but we do have a process to track all that. It was received through the Acme Nourishing Neighbors program and ultimately through, like I said, folks that shopped at Acme and Drescher and made this generous donation. Our food service department noted that they utilize these gift cards to purchase vital, often specialty ingredients for our school breakfast and lunch program. And Mrs. Deli and her department are extremely thankful for the support of our community and Acme Markets. So we do recommend that the board accept this donation.
And again, a huge thank you to not just Acme Markets, but all of the shoppers at Acme Markets who contributed to this program. I have one quick question, which is procedurally speaking, because the food service program is an enterprise fund, does this go straight to them? We are approving it, but it goes straight into that fund, or does it pass through?
So the board would just accept it. If this was a cash donation, we would accept it into the general fund and then approve a transfer. But because it's gift cards, we don't need to take those procedural steps. So the board would just accept the donation. And then that's what I mentioned. We have a process where we track it, how we're utilizing those gift cards.
So we're talking actual physical gift cards.
Actual physical gift cards. That is correct. Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions on this item? All right. So we'll move this ahead. Yes. All right. Thank you again to everybody. We are up to our second opportunity for public participation on any agenda items or any other items that may come before the board in the future. And we will follow our usual procedures.
Ginny Vitella, Ambler. First of all, I just want to correct the record slightly that the original plan for the bus depot was actually on the Upper Dublin High School campus property, which is where it was when the building got torn down. We got denied that because the geothermal, we couldn't put the building on top of it, and then they had to put, the township made us put a retention basin, and so then there was no longer any room on this area, but we still had allocated $3.6 million for that project. So I just want to make sure the location at Fort Washington Elementary School was not the original. The original was supposed to be where it was on this campus, somewhere on this campus, because I know Mark has corrected me about that it wasn't exactly the same location as the other place because the parking and everything, minor detail. Bottom line is the first thing, it was supposed to be part of this project. What is upsetting, you said that we don't have to, by law, share the findings of the real estate agent. And I say, just because you don't have to doesn't mean that you shouldn't. There is, again, community outcry about this location. Again, I want to reiterate, there's nothing against the transportation department. What we've put them through for 15 years is disgusting. But this location is just has been the easy way to go. The one person who spoke up against it that was been on this board as of recently was Andy Kessler. Unfortunately, we don't have him advocating for us anymore. And there are hundreds and hundreds of people. I think we owe it to these families, to the people impacted. If this was going up at Jarretttown and you now had to go past 15 cars, a fence, a bus thing to get to a field to play on because the field closest to your building was flooded, which they were supposed to fix. They promised when they put the geothermal in, because that was a problem from before, because I know I ran big strides. The kids would have to go over the muddy mess and then they have to come out to the Lockash Fields. So the kids that grass is our only grass we have. It's flooding. And so what they do, and I think it was, you brought it up, that I don't think you all necessarily realize, I know the Fort Washington parents probably do, that when that's flooded, which happens even after 6 inches of rain, it happens then for a month after. You know, it's there all the time, even with a little bit of rain. The kids go out further to the Lockash Fields, and they go out to the Field of Dreams to play, to have an outdoor grassy area to play. Fort Washington, I would argue, of all the elementary schools, has the least amount of green space, and now we're taking up this huge section of it for a bus depot. It is unimaginative. It is not a good location. And we found out with Sandy Run, when you force a building into a location that is not ideal, you end up with things with a non-functioning softball field, a basketball court that is away from the building that can't be used. And you also, Sandy Run did not put up lights on a turf field, which we desperately need fields in this area for all the sports, all the kids to participate, because of the few neighbors that would see those lights at night. And those definitely turn off by 10 o'clock because the kids and the fields are done their activities by 10 o'clock, those lights go out. And if not, sometimes early, if Spark, if they're not booked, they go out when they're not booked and they go out. So this is a bus depot that will have lights on all the time with those surrounding neighbors. This is a residential, and we're forcing a round peg into a square hole, or a square peg and a round hole, whatever the saying, you got my drift. And it is unfortunate that we aren't actually listening to the people this affects immediately. This is the easy answer, is to put it here because we own the property. Let's find the difficult answer. Why don't we move, we haven't heard a presentation about those other options, and we haven't even discussed, well, maybe we help the township build another bay so we can use that bay. Maybe we use library space. The library has 50-some parking space that they were willing to give to an apartment complex that nobody wants on open space, but somehow they don't have space for our buses, which is right next to another property. I just think we're not being unimaginative and going back to the same location after 6 years. The people cannot say more except for they are against it.
Caitlin Johnson, Ambler. First, I just want to say thank you for having that extra participation while the gentlemen were still here so that we could get more information and just understand. Like, I think that was just extremely valuable, and I really appreciate you guys giving us that opportunity to understand even better. We know that you guys work really hard, and I'm not trying to make things more difficult for you. I just want to seek understand, and hopefully all of us can create something better by bouncing ideas off. And I just basically had 2 questions. So when I look at the rendering and it has the building and has the trees, I was just curious of like what our children would truly see, because in some of the diagrams I'd read earlier, they said there would be some type of fencing and there would be some type of netting, but I just don't really see it in this drawing, so I was just curious. And the other part, when I was looking at the additional landscaping considerations, I love the idea of making more trees near 309 because of numerous reasons that we've all talked about previously. And the other thing is there was another like squiggle next to like the boomerang that was an option for more. I was just curious because that's right next to the blacktop where the kids currently try to squeeze in more grass area next to the blacktop right now. And because the areas where they tend to play sometimes are flooded, they're now actually going like all the way over here to try to get grass because they desperately love grass. And over there, like the kid has come home multiple times with hives down his arms because over there is some type of thing he's allergic to. So I'm just curious about what was the option for over there where the kids are trying to get more grass because the other area has water. All right, thank you so much.
I live in Fort Washington. I just wanted to thank all of you for regularly giving your time to our school district, now specifically addressing the need.
I'm sorry, could you, Ms. Starfield, if you can just
sorry.
closer to the mic? Yeah, thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, so I'm Pam Starfield, and I live in Fort Washington, and I wanted to thank all of you for regularly giving your time to our school district, and now specifically for addressing the need for a new bus garage. The ICS presentation was clear and seemed thorough. I think we had a good discussion tonight, and I appreciate Andy's responses to the concerns that were mentioned. I agree that we should move forward while continuing to review other options. I would also like ICS to revisit the concerns mentioned about traffic flow and parking to see if these can be mitigated. Finally, I'm wondering whether it would be prudent for you to send out a mailing to Upper Dublin parents to explain the pros and cons and why you have recommended that we pursue a new bus garage, including the 309 option. There's a lot of scuttlebutt in the community. For instance, I've heard from neighbors that they don't understand why such a large expenditure is being made for a garage, and why can't this sum be better spent on our students' education? Obviously, they don't have all the facts. I'd love to have a more complete explanation given to these parents in the form of a mailing to end the rumor mill. However, I don't have the experience with the possible effect of such a communication, and it may create new issues rather than help to minimize the current ones. So I certainly understand if you don't go that route. Again, I just wanted to say that I very much appreciate all of your ongoing service and time. As school board members, you do a great job and are frequently unappreciated.
David Gross, Ambler. I spoke up a few minutes ago about the maintenance of this property. I appreciate Mr. Lester admitting that there's mold on the exterior of the building. I don't think ICS is qualified. The structural cracks, they are not normal. And if you turn around, we're in the beautiful Cardinal room. That's a water leak in this meeting room. That's from air conditioning. Those are air conditioning vents. That's what I'm discussing about the maintenance. The maintenance of the township properties, especially this building, is not normal. Once again, thank you.
All right, seeing nobody else coming to the mic, we'll close this public participation and see if there are any responses. I'll start with the administration. Anything from Dr. Smith or Mr. Leckman?
I think the only thing I would just like to, just because it was a new concept tonight, is the landscaping plan around the transportation facility. And just to make sure we're being clear, there's landscaping that is obviously part of the design that ICS did. But there is, if this is approved on Monday night and we move forward, there is much more work to do in all of those areas that they pointed out that are opportunities. And I think that's the work we would start having discussions with ICS very soon after the approval, to start to plan out what that might look like and bring recommendations back to this committee for consideration. So I just want to make sure that's clear for everyone, all the board members and anyone that might be in the room.
Okay. I have a couple. One, regarding Ms. Johnson, if you want to come up after the meeting and just show me a little closer what you, because I couldn't quite make it out from there. Happy to try to answer that. I don't have any evidence that the original plan was on the high school, was on this side of Loch Alsh Avenue. The only evidence I've ever found was the other side of Loch Alsh Avenue. Perhaps that's the case, but despite the considerable amount of research I've done, I haven't found it. And you know, the being denied due to geothermal and requiring the detention piece, I don't have any evidence of that. I'd love to see it if you have some, just to fill out my knowledge. Regarding lights being on all the time, I don't think we actually know that yet. We do know that by ordinance, if we wanted to keep them on, they would have to be lowered, and we do know that by ordinance they would have to be, what's the term, a hard cutoff light that really illuminates. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, the term is the hard cutoff. It's basically how the light's designed, where the output of the light drops down into a calculated area.
But it's not necessarily the case that we have to have them on 24/7. That's our decision. If if the point is
that is a township ordinance that you can't have.
You can't have them on.
You can't have them on all night long.
Okay.
It's based on your business hours.
Yeah, I was going to say you only need to be on when staff needs to see for security purposes. Cameras can see in the dark these days, so that's not a requirement. So I have no expectation that the lights will be on all the time. Anyone else have any comments regarding anything tonight, public participation or otherwise? Okay, so with that, I will announce our next Finance Committee meeting will be Wednesday, February 21st at 6 p.m. here in the Cardinal Room, and we are adjourned. Thank you.